CEO Daddy. Chapter 1 Framed by the Stepmother. Pain. Morning. Waking up by the blinding sunlight, Jane opened her eyes with a splitting headache. What she saw was an unfamiliar room, and then her eyes looked down and saw clothes scattered all over the floor. Widening her eyes sharply, she used one hand to support her back, lust in the air. Because she overheard her stepmother scolding her mother for being a mistress. She was so furious. She let her stepbrother, who made fun of her, fell down from the balcony. Subsequently, she was knocked unconscious by her stepmother and stepsister. As soon as she woke up, she was in this hotel. Jane pushed herself off the bed in anger and quickly picked up her clothes. Suddenly, a watch fell off. On the back of the chair beside her, there was a man's suit jacket. Jane angrily threw the watch against the wall. He had taken away her innocence. So did he just use the watch to get rid of her? Go to hell. She walked to the bathroom, and her bruised face reflected in the mirror. Her two eyes were black to the point that they turned purple, and her eyes were swollen. A pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes now became narrowed eyes. Jane looked at her bruised face and thought back to the scene of her stepmother and stepsister violently beating her up yesterday. She was a little scared and resentful. Which bastard was so uncritical that he could have sexual desire facing her face? He was simply a beast. Jane ruthlessly scrubbed herself multiple times, just like she was going to wash off a layer of skin. Only then did she leave the hotel on two slender legs. 10 minutes later, the other room door of the hotel opened, and a charming young girl walked out. The girl looked proud and complacent as she quickly walked to Jane's room. She took out a room card from her bag and opened the door. Looking at the messy bed, she laughed maliciously. Following that, she forcefully lifted the quilt, and the white sheet was speckled with blood. She gritted her teeth and said, she was indeed a virgin. So, she and Ryan have been together for 2 years, and nothing really happened. Great. If Ryan knows that she is not a virgin anymore, he will definitely break up with Jane. Brenda was going to take photographs, as proof for her mom to see. There was a sudden knock on the door. Brenda was shocked. She walked to the door with a guilty conscience, opened the peephole, and peeked outside. Who is out there? For what? Brenda asked with great momentum. I am here on behalf on my young master to thank you for saving his life, the man outside said respectfully. Brenda was startled. After hearing the word thank you, she immediately extended her hand to open the door. The man outside the door gestured to the 2 bodyguards in black behind him, and the 2 men immediately rushed in. Hey, what are you guys doing? Brenda was so scared that her face turned pale. Don't worry, miss, we are only confirming that my young master did indeed spend the night in this room. The man still maintained his polite attitude. Your young master. Brenda's eyes widened a little. At this time, 2 bodyguards walked out quickly. One of them was holding a suit jacket, while the other man was holding onto a watch. The young man took the jacket and the watch and looked them over. Then he respectfully gave Brenda a name card. This is my young master's name card. Congratulations. My young master will help you fulfill any of your wishes. Who is your young master? Brenda hesitated, but still reached out to take the card. Eric Martin. The man enunciated the name clearly. Brenda was stunned. Chapter 2 Coming back after 5 years. 5 years later, in the economy class on the international airline flying to America, a few girls were holding onto their phones and secretly taking photos of a pair of cute babies. The little boy wore a small checked shirt, with a pair of gray jeans. There was a pair of large eyes as brilliant as a gem under his neat and black bangs. Furthermore, under his small, exquisite nose were thin, red lips, which were moist and breathtakingly beautiful. Beside him, there was a little girl of the same age, exquisite as a doll. She had waist, long black hair and thick bangs that covered her snow-white forehead, and she wore a shiny gemstone hairpin. Her crystal bright eyes were just like the little boy's. Her cute little face was as beautiful as a most exquisite doll, and her little mouth was pouting slightly as she bit on a lollipop. She was so sweet that people couldn't move their eyes away. Sis, stop taking pictures of us. If you continue, I'll get angry. Noticing that the girls were secretly taking photos, the little boy immediately tried to persuade them with a childish voice. The girls more than 20 years old next to him immediately felt embarrassed and turned off the camera with a flushed face. Oh my God, what a cute and beautiful babies. I couldn't take it anymore. I want to steal them. Can't you see that a woman is sitting beside them? Their mom is here, so don't overthink. Besides a pair of cute babies, a young girl was napping, leaning against the back of a chair. The girl had a snow-white skin and a small face with melon seeds. Her waist, long hair had been pulled to the side and tied into a ponytail. She was wearing a loose black t-shirt and white denim shorts. She looked very pure. Brother, do you want to wake Mummy up? Mummy hasn't had lunch yet, the little girl asked in her childish voice as she looked at the little boy beside her. Let Mummy sleep a little longer. It's still early. The little boy was her older brother. Although he was still young, there was something intelligent about him. His pair of beautiful big eyes were calm and collected, unlike the naive and adorable little girl beside him. Mummy is so pitiful to stay up all night working. On the little girl's cute little face, there was a hint of pity. Rachel, don't make our mother angry anymore, okay? Kyle stroked his sister's little head as he advised her like a little adult. I'll be good. Rachel's tender little face immediately bloomed into considerate smile. Half an hour later, the plane stopped at American Capital International Airport. Mummy, it's time to get off the plane. The little boy reached out his little hand, gently pushed at Jane's arm, and whispered into her ear. Jane woke up from a deep sleep, reached out to rub her sleepy eyes, and looked down at the two cute little babies. Then the corners of her beautiful mouth curled up. Sorry, Mummy is too tired. Have you guys eaten something? Jane looked apologetically at the boy-girl twins and asked gently. We've eaten all the bread and drunk a bottle of milk. Mummy, are you hungry? I left you bread and milk. Rachel smiled sweetly, and she was adorable. Jane sighed in relief and shook her head. I'm not hungry. Let's go. After undoing the seat belts of the two babies, Jane took them by the hands and walked out of the cabin. After 5 years, she finally came back. Chapter 3: A pair of cute babies. Jane was in somewhat of a daze as she brought down her head to take a gander at her two children, who was adjacent to her. She felt as if she had a dream. 5 years ago, when she discovered that she was pregnant, she was determined to go to the hospital and have an abortion. However, she was told that her blood type was scarce, and if she had the abortion, it would be tough for her to be a mother in this lifetime. Mummy, our luggage is here. The two lovely babies were only 4 years old, still in their most innocent years, and especially novel to everything. One big suitcase and two small suitcases were delivered to them. Jane took down the bags, and each baby carried one. Come on, let's go back to your grandma's sisters. Jane came back this time because of the development of her work. A famous design company at home had found her and was very interested in her fashion design concept. They promised her a high salary and made an official invitation. Jane had already spent all her pocket money and the living expenses that she swindled from her father abroad. Considering her 2 children she needed to raise, she had no choice but to give up her studies and return to her country to work. Coincidentally, her aunt's children had all gone off to study and work, so she was left alone at home. When she heard that Jane was returning back, she offered to help her take care of the 2 little fellows. Everything seemed to have been arranged perfectly. Jane had gotten tired of being abroad, and she especially wanted to see her relatives. Furthermore, her 2 babies had become more sensible, so she finally decided to set foot on her journey back home. As the 3 of them walked along the aisle, the 2 incredibly beautiful babies immediately caught the attention of the passengers beside them. What a pair of beautiful twins, and their genes are perfect. So cute. They are so cute. I really want to hug them. Are they the child of some celebrity? Why do they look so beautiful? They are just like dolls. Jane listened to the discussions of the people around her about her children. She could not help but stare at her 2 babies. Indeed, the genes of her babies were surprisingly good. The 2 of them were born under the same conditions, but they were of different genders. Her son was handsome, and her daughter was sweet and cute. However, the only similarity was that both of them were extremely beautiful. Not a single flaw could be seen in their facial features. On the streets abroad, people often came over to strike up a conversation with them, and there were even people who wanted to invite them to do some advertisements. Jane reached out and touched her oval face. She kept having the feeling that her 2 babies did not inherit her genes adequately. Thus, what these 2 little fellows inherited weren't her good genes at all, but their father's. Thinking of their father, Jane felt cold sweat trickling down her back. That's the man who gave her nightmares for the rest of her life. Mummy, what are you thinking about again? Should we stop a car? A small hand gently pushed Jane, and her son's calm and pleasant voice rang in her ears. Jane immediately woke up from her trance. She squatted down, adjusted her son's collar, then patted her daughter's head, and said, "Remember what I told to do. When we get to my aunt's house after a while, you must remember to say hello." "Don't worry, Mummy. We'll say hello." Sweetly. Kyle laughed like a little demon, and he was so bright and mischievous. Jane stopped a taxi and led 2 babies to get in the car. The taxi drove off Airport Avenue and headed towards the city. Chapter 4. Pure girl was not used to describe her. Jane looked out of the window, and suddenly, she saw a familiar face on the roadside billboard. It was Brenda. In these 5 years, she didn't know what happened to Brenda. Still, Brenda actually went from an unknown female student of an art school to a household female celebrity. Among the words used to describe her, the concept that impressed Jane most was the pure girl. Pure girl. Bah! Jane gave out a cold laugh at the bottom of her heart. As far as she knows, Brenda had been changing boyfriends nonstop in high school. After entering art school, she turned to a rich second generation to be her boyfriend, and she had a very extravagant and indulgent school life. But now, she had transformed into a pure girl in the eyes of the men. The world was not fair. Jane lowered her head and held her 2 children tightly in her arms. She didn't want to dig into the past grudges. Her only goal now was to raise the 2 little kids by her side. Other than that, There was nothing else she wanted to ask for. The two little fellows seemed to be a bit tired as they were in her arms, with their eyelids drooping. Rachel's willpower was not strong enough, so she fell asleep very quickly. Kyle was like a little man. Although he was also sleepy, he kept himself from sleeping. In a while, Mummy would hold his little sister. He had to stay awake and not let his mother get too tired. Mummy, that building is so tall. Kyle suddenly pointed to the building outside the window. It was erected as if a colossal pillars that reached the sky and exclaimed out loud. Jane looked in the direction of his finger. Sure enough, in the middle of the many tall buildings, there were two much higher ones, which towered up to the sky and were very magnificent. The incredible thing was the countless air corridors between the two buildings, which were representatives of power and influence. Yeah, it's big and tall, and so spectacular. Jane listened to her son replied, smilingly. I really wish I could go in and take a look. Kyle hoped innocently. Jane burst out and left her and rubbed his little head. That's where people work, and they won't let anyone visit it. Kyle pursed his beautiful and thin lips. Hearing his mother's words, he felt a little disappointed. This iconic building in America was called the King's International Building. It symbolized the owner's supreme authority in America, and also showed the owner's wealth. At this moment, on the first floor of the King's International Building, a silver Pagani limited edition sports car was parked in front of the hall. A young woman wearing a fish-tailed skirt stepped out of the car. Her long, wavy, red hair made her look very coquettish. There was no sound with 7 centimeters of high heels on the fine carpet, and Brenda walked towards the elevator in an incredibly charming manner. She pressed on the 66th floor's elevator and thought that no matter what, she would see Eric tonight and invite him to her birthday party. Brenda lifted her enchanting long hair and intentionally gathered her hair to her right chest, revealing her snow-white and beautiful neck. Having been in the entertainment industry for a long time, she knew clearly what style men liked. The thick and heavy door of the president's office of the King's International Building was pushed open by the assistant, and Brenda walked in gracefully. In the spacious and bright office, there was a black desk in the middle of the room. The color of the entire office was only black, white and gray. The cold and hard aura perfectly matched the owner's temperament. When Brenda stepped in, her charming eyes were straight glued onto the noble and lazy man, who was sitting on the big chair behind the desk. The man wore an orthodox black suit and a black shirt. His temperament was so kingly and mysterious. Chapter 5 Taking back what belonged to her. Seeing her coming, the man didn't move his gaze away from the documents on the table. With a prosaic voice, he asked, "What's up?" Brenda walked to the front of the desk with light steps. There was a sweet smile on her exquisite face, and her voice sounded a little flirtatious. "President Martin, today is my birthday. Could I invite you to my home tonight?" "Sorry, I have a full schedule today. I can spare the time." Eric's expression was still as cold as water. The woman's passionate invitation did not pique his interest. He allowed this woman to enter his domain only because her body had saved his life 5 years ago. However, this did not mean that this woman could act as she pleased in front of him. After 4 consecutive years of rejection, the expression in Brenda's eyes suddenly became dejected. She forced out a tinge of tears, making her charming, amorous eyes watery and moving. "All right, I understand." Brenda suffered a considerable blow. The man in front of her helped her become a queen, but he never wanted to be her king. This was a thing that Brenda had been powerless to do. Other men were all over her. Only this man who was as noble as a monarch. He treated her as heir. Anything else? The man slightly raised his brows, revealing his dark face. Brenda's entire body seemed to have been lightly hit by an electric current. Her soul was almost sucked in by his terrifying and deep-set eyes. The man's facial features were sexy and deep. Every line of his face was perfect, as if it had been invented by God himself. His sexy and thin lips slightly moved. His calm and emotionless voice instantly caused Brenda to wake up as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. "Nothing, I won't disturb your work any longer. I'll be leaving now." With tears in her eyes, Brenda left the office in a hurry. As the night fell, Jane had already settled 2 babies down, with her aunt to take care of them. She was very relieved. The 2 little guys had always been obedient since they were young, especially her son, born half an hour earlier than his sister. He had the bearing and demeanor of being a brother, being calm and wise at such a young age. He could take good care of his younger sister without her explanation. Jane felt that the most correct decision she had made in her life was to give birth to this pair of adorable babies. With them, she would have the courage to make arduous efforts and fight against the world. "Kyle, take good care of your sister. Listen to your grandma's sister. Mom has something important to do, and I must go out." Jane squatted down, rubbed her son's little head, and gently said it. Then, she held her son's little face and kissed him, and then she kissed her daughter's little head. Susan looked at Jane worriedly and said with concern, "Just come back as soon as you get your stuff, okay?" Jane looked at her aunt's concerned face and nodded. "I know, Mummy. Be careful outside." Kyle took a few steps forward and caught up to her. His young voice was soothing to hear. Jane patted her son's head again and smiled. "Well, then," she pushed the door and left. She tightened her backpack. Her aunt was worried that she would get into a fight with those shameless people, but she was much calmer. She was not as impulsive as she was 5 years ago. This time, she only wanted to retrieve her mother's things. As long as they handed the stuff to her, she would immediately leave. When Jane rushed to Romulo family, she discovered that there was a long queue at the entrance of the villa. The roads on both sides of the door were packed with reporters and onlookers. Chapter 6. She was not welcome back. What was going on? Jane was startled. She did not know what was going on, but from time to time, she would hear a few screams coming from the side, and amid the cry, she could vaguely hear the name of a famous celebrity. The celebrities came to Romulo family to walk on the red carpet. Jane did her best to push her way into the crowd. Under the auspiciously gaze of the crowd, she walked quickly towards the main entrance. An actress, who was currently being photographed by the journalists, suddenly saw Jane and thought her to be a domestic servant. "Hey, come over here. Help me lift my skirt." Jane turned around and glanced at the actress and asked uncertainly, "Are you calling for me?" "Yeah, it's you. Come over here and help me." The actress's tone was a bit impatient, as though lifting the skirt for her was a rare honor. "Sorry, I'm busy," Jane replied coldly and then left in tremendous strides. That actress has never received such a cold treatment before, and her face instantly flushed. The reporters on the side immediately took photos of her being rejected. The actress resentfully stared at Jane's back and gnashed her teeth. Jane dressed very casually, among a group of well-groomed women. She looked extremely out of place. Even the clothes of the Romulo family's waiters today was better than hers. From the moment Jane entered the door, she had been treated as a waiter and servant. A lot of people wanted to boss her around. Jane ignored them completely. She did not want to enter this home anymore, and this place was no longer her home. Since her father sent her abroad to live, she had not taken this place as her home. Today, she only came to retrieve what her mother left her. Once she took the things, she would immediately disappear. Jane looked around the hall and saw Brenda and her mother. They were now celebrities in the rich world. After Brenda entered the entertainment industry, she had been going well. In the past 4 years and more, she had gone from an unknown person to the most famous actress that no one could replace. Shirley was dressed like an upper-class woman. She was holding onto a glass of wine and accepting the blessings from all around. Jane was surrounded by another group of young people, all of whom were essential people. They were either mainstream celebrities, or popular male and female stars. All of them were speaking nicely to Brenda, flattering her and fawning on her. Brenda didn't have any other abilities. The only thing to envy was the strong man she relied on. It must be nice to be flattered, so Brenda had an enchanting smile on her face the entire time. But very quickly, the smile on her face frozen, her eyes widened, and she looked at Jane, who was walking towards her in disbelief. Why is she back, and at this hour? Brenda was shocked, and it was clear that she did not want to see Jane. She would never want to see this face again in her life. Jane had already quickly passed through the crowd and stood in front of Brenda. She calmly said, "Where are the things that my mother left for me?" Brenda did not immediately answer her, and she only smiled at the people around her. "You guys go ahead and play. I have some family matters to take care of, and I'll chat with you guys later. Who gave you permission to return home?" Brenda's eyes were immediately filled with anger, as though Jane's return was a matter of humiliation to her. "I graduated. Of course, I have to come back," Jane sneered. Brenda's face immediately turned livid, and she said in an unfriendly tone, "If you want your mother's things, come out and chat with me." Chapter 7. Using her identity to pressure her. Jane quickly followed her, and after exiting the gate, they stood at small clearings beside the gate. "Jane, you really pick a hell of a time. Do you come here on purpose to make things difficult for me? Don't you know that today is my birthday? Look at how many famous people have come here, but you show up dressed like a beggar. Are you trying to let people know that I have a little sister who is a disgrace?" Seeing that there was no one around, Brenda scolded Jane. Brenda called her a beggar and considered her a disgrace, which was extremely unpleasant to hear. Jane didn't react much to her curses, and it was just that her eyes freed colder, and her voice was icy. "If you think I've lost your face, quickly return my mother's stuff to me. I won't stay a second longer. After all these years, who knows if that pile of junk is still there? Now, you want to let me help you find it? I'm not free. Can't you see that I have so many guests to entertain?" Brenda crossed her arms in front of her chest with an impatient look on her face. She also didn't want to help Jane find those old things. "If I don't get them, I won't leave." Jane was instantly angry. Last time, she was kicked out of the country and didn't have the time to take those things away. Now that she returned, she will take away what her mother had left behind with her no matter what. Are you threatening me, Jane? Things are different now. Keep your eyes open and see who I am now. For a lowly status like yours, you don't even have the qualifications to bring me my shoes. And how dare you yell at me? Do you believe that I will let the bodyguards throw you out like trash? There were a lot of reasons why Brenda didn't like Jane. Still, the one main reason for Brenda to hate her to the bones, and it was the incident that happened at the hotel 5 years ago. Back then, when she snuck into the room where Jane was humiliated by a man, she was gonna take a picture and announce her achievement to her mother. Still, she didn't expect that a young man would come. The man didn't say anything. After checking the suit jacket and the watch, he gave her a name card. Later on, she found out a secret. The man who had sex with Jane in the hotel that night was actually Eric, the eldest son of the Martin family. At this moment, the reason why Brenda was afraid of Jane's coming back was that she was worried that the matter back then would be exposed. Jane did not expect that Brenda was even more arrogant after a few years. "I don't care who you are, and I just want my things back." Jane's beautiful face was filled with anger. Those things belonged to her mother and were left behind by her mother. They were extremely precious, and she definitely could not lose them. Just as Brenda wanted to mock her ruthlessly, there was a sudden twinkle in her eyes. She was startled when she saw the great car outside the door. Soon after, her eyes glowed with joy. Eric actually personally came. Too unexpected, too happy. Brenda's eyes quickly swept across the furious Jane. Then, she suddenly leaned forward and sneered at Jane. "I know where the unlucky things are, but I just don't want to return them to you. It's fine if you don't show up, but now that you have returned, I immediately recall the foolish thing you did back then. My brother's leg still hasn't fully recovered. Jane, do you know? I want to strangle you to death, but you even want to take something from my house. Bah, no way. Tomorrow, I will put a torch on the dead woman's things and burn them all." Chapter 8, Infuriating him. "How dare you?" Jane felt chills throughout her body, and her two small hands were clenched tightly in anger. "Why won't I dare? Do you know what secret my father told me when he was drunk? He said you aren't his daughter. You are a wild species with an unknown father." Brenda's gaze fell upon the figure that was getting closer and closer. She was anxious and did not know how to make Jane go crazy, so she told her the biggest secret that was hidden in her heart. "Shut up." Jane was rational and calm, but when Brenda said that she was a bastard and even wanted to burn her mother's things, she was utterly enraged. "How to? Are you not convinced? Do you want to hate me? Hate me, Jane? You still don't have the balls." "Pot!" Jane fiercely slapped Brenda's face. Brenda immediately moaned tenderly. She covered her face that had been slapped, as though she had suffered a significant injury, but she was still sneering. "Jane, that's all you can do, isn't it? You this wild species, you are really a disgrace, and you can live a dignified life in your whole life." "Brenda," Jane ground her teeth in hatred. She sincerely wished that she had a blade in her hand, so she could slice this woman thousands of times. Jane was so angry that she lost all sense of reason. She raised her hand and wanted to slap Brenda again, but her little hand was suddenly grabbed by a large, iron-like palm. Jane turned her head to look at him in shocking anger, only to see a man's ice-cold, emotionless face. When Jane saw the man's handsome face, she was so shocked that she couldn't even speak. She couldn't speak because she was attracted by his exquisite and handsome face, but because this face was so much like her son's. Seeing Eric walk over to stop Jane from hitting her, Brenda immediately squeezed out her tears and grievance and covered her face with her hands. She spoke in an injured voice. "Sister, how can you hit me so recklessly? What did I do wrong that you want to beat me up like this? Before Jane could even react to the man's appearance that resembled her son, she heard Brenda's arrogant tone just now had instantly become soft and pathetic. She was shocked again, and her eyes stared straight at Brenda, only to see her eyes were actually red, filled with tears, and genuinely pitiful. Jane's brain short-circuited for a moment, and once again looked at the man beside her in shock. His face, it was very similar. It's weird. Jane muttered a sentence that only she understood. Eric curled his lips coldly, treating Jane's shocked expression as a kind of infatuation towards him, and sneered with extreme disgust. Why did you beat her up? When Jane heard his cold and tepid voice, her thoughts were immediately pulled back, and she realized that this man seemed to want to seek justice for Brenda. When she thought about Brenda called her a wild species just now and even wanted to burn her mother's things, the anger in her heart burned once again. None of your business. Let me go. Jane was furious, and she immediately wanted to struggle free from the man's grasp. Brenda suddenly looked kind and said gently, President Martin, she is my sister, and she doesn't have any ill intentions. She just wants me to introduce a few famous managers to her. But I didn't agree, so Jane was so angry that she wanted to laugh when she heard Brenda's nonsense. What an entertainer. Her acting was really impressive. Just a moment ago, she was even like a tigress with overbearing aura. Still, she was pretending to be helpful now. She wants to become famous. With such average looks, Eric had personally witnessed Jane beating Brenda up, and he naturally treated Jane as a madwoman who wanted to be famous, so his remarks were sarcastic. Chapter 9 The Man's Warnings. Jane felt extremely resentful. She did not expect that this man concluded that she was a bad woman without even asking about anything, and also scolded her for being average in looks. Hurry up and let me go. As I said, it's none of your business. Jane was so angry that she had almost lost all sense of reason. She had always thought that after becoming a mother, she had cultivated her temperament very well. Still, today, she was entirely enraged by the man and the woman. If you dare hit her again, I'll chop off your hands, Eric warned her coldly. When Jane heard this, she was really going to break down. She gritted her teeth in hatred and bit at the back of the man's head. The man did not expect this woman to be like a dog. Her sharp teeth even bite out a thin line of blood marks on the back of his hand. Madwoman. Fuck off. Eric had never been insulted like this. He immediately let go of his hand in anger and roared at Jane through gritted teeth. Jane's little hand gained its freedom, but it hurt to be pinched by this man. She glared at Brenda, and a layer of tears appeared in her eyes. Brenda still had a pitiful look from being wronged and hurt. Yet, when facing Jane's unwilling eyes, the pleased expression in her eyes was undeniable. Miss, please leave here immediately. Otherwise, don't blame us being impolite. A few bodyguards who followed behind Eric issued an eviction order against Jane with a gloomy expression on their faces. Jane hadn't gotten what she came for, so she was not willing to leave. She wanted to rush into the hall, go upstairs, and find her mother's stuff by herself. Unfortunately, she had no sooner made a move than she was stopped by two bodyguards. In the next second, her petite and frail body was lifted up one by one of the bodyguards. Let me go. I'll leave by myself. Don't touch me, bastard. Jane was so angry. Brenda was hard to deal with, and now there was another man to support her. That man looked like a powerful man. Couldn't she take her mother's things back? Jane was directly thrown out of the door. She was defenseless and fell to the ground in an ugly posture. A few bored reporters, who were waiting to snap pictures, immediately ran over to take a look when they saw a woman being thrown out. Seeing that someone was trying to take pictures of her, Jane was so shocked that she quickly jumped up from the ground and ran away without caring about the pain. No matter how fast she ran, her face was still captured by one of the reporters in the video. Another desperate fanatic. Being thrown out by the bodyguards is really pitiful and laughable. This bunch of brainless fans really should be reported more often. Tomorrow, I will make a big headline and use this woman as a model to properly brainwash those brainless fans. See? This is the result of chasing after the stars. The two reporters saw Jane being thrown out and started talking to each other. Just as Jane was fleeing in a sorry state, a heated discussion about two adorable babies appeared on the internet. On a top-rated video app, a 2-minute video was crazily reprinted and discussed. In the video, there was a pair of boy-girl twins who were astonishingly beautiful. They were charming, just like they were coming out of a comic book. Once the video was uploaded, they immediately captivated everyone's hearts. Many people left messages, saying that they wanted to steal the two babies and bring them back home. The pitiful Jane and her two kids still didn't know that they would cause a huge commotion on the internet soon. Jane's children would be praised crazily by many with disdain. Jane awkwardly left the Romulo family and stood far away, looking at the villa of Romulo family that was lit up by the bright lights. She angrily bit her lips. Since she didn't get the stuff back today, she would come back again. Chapter 10 Little Enemies. By the time she got back to her aunt's, the two babies had already showered. Kyle sat on the sofa, playing with an electric robot. On the side, Susan was gently blowing Rachel's waist-length hairs with the electric dryer in hand. The little guy was young, but her hair was surprisingly good. Her glossy black hair set her face off like a piece of white jade, which was indescribably beautiful and delicate. "Mummy, you're back. Have you had dinner?" Kyle immediately put down the toy in his hands and ran over to Jane to care about her. Her son was very warm and caring at an early age. "I've eaten. After taking a shower, quickly go to bed. Tomorrow morning, you will report to the kindergarten." Jane couldn't help but kiss her son's little face and said softly. Susan had already blown all of Rachel's long hair dry and used a rubber band to tie up two braids for her. "Jane, you go take a bath first. I'll coax these two little guys to sleep." Susan had raised two children her life, so she had a lot of experience in coaxing children. The two little babies of Jane were surprisingly obedient and sensible. "Thank you, Aunt." Jane thanked her gratefully, and her eyes were moist. However, in front of her child, she had to endure the grievances she suffered. No matter how much it hurt, she would never shed tears in front of her children. Although the babies were young, they were brilliant. The adult's depression would also affect the baby's mood. "Stupid girl, there's no need to be polite with me." Susan could already tell that Jane must have suffered some injustice when she returned empty-handed, and could not help but feel sorry for her. "Mummy, we will go to sleep first." Kyle walked over and took Rachel's hand. Two tiny figures entered the bedroom. "Brother, I want Mummy to cuddle me to sleep." Rachel patted her small mouth and made her request in a low voice. Kyle turned his head and patted her cheeks. "Mummy will hug you after she takes a bath. Let's lie on the bed first." Susan immediately smiled gently. "Rachel, Let me carry you and sleep, okay? No, I want my mummy. If mummy doesn't hug me, I won't be able to sleep. Rachel's black eyes were immediately clouded with tears. She had always been well protected by her brother Kyle. She was a little delicate, but not unreasonable, just a little persistence of her own. Idiot Rachel. Kyle immediately made a face at her. I'm not an idiot. You're the bad brother. Rachel immediately became angry, and she started scolding him in her childish voice. Kyle stuck out his tongue at her and ran mischievously into the bedroom. Rachel was so angry that her eyes were watery. Susan couldn't bear to see her cry, so she hurriedly pulled her in her arms to coax her. Susan knew that every little fellow had their own habits before they went to sleep. Rachel wanted to sleep with her mother, which was normal. The two kids were still a little uncomfortable in their new surroundings. It was hard for them to fall asleep at the moment. The little guys who were cursing at each other just a moment ago had somehow gotten back together and were jumping around on the bed like little rabbits. Susan stood on the side of the bed and watched them with trepidation. Be careful. Don't fall off the bed. When Jane came out from her shower, she saw that the bedroom was filled with noises. She shook her head and laughed. The nature of children couldn't be tamed thoroughly. Stop, Mummy will sleep with you. We still need to go to school tomorrow morning. Jane walked to the bedside and arranged the pillows one by one. She turned around and said to Susan, "Aunt, you go sleep first. I'll bring them to sleep." "All right." When they fall asleep, come here to me. I have something to tell you. In front of the children, Susan did not want to ask her about the result. Jane nodded her head. "All right, when they are asleep, I will come over." Image attachment. Large, CEO Daddy.